This podcast is offered by the San Francisco Zen Center on the web at www.sfzc.org. Our public programs are made possible by donations from people like you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shundo. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. Wonderful. I'd like to thank Abbot Marco for inviting me to make a spectacle of myself 2 evenings running in the Zendo. And I'd like to start with a story. One of these Zen stories that's 1,000 years old and yet is still worth discussing in the present day. When Dongshan took his leave, Nanyuan said, "Make a thorough study of the Buddha Dharma and broadly benefit the world." Dongshan said, "I have no question about studying the Buddha Dharma, but what is it to broadly benefit the world?" Nanyuan said, "Not to disregard a single being." Not to disregard a single being. So I realized that I have many different constituencies here this evening. There are those who have been practicing intimately in the valley together for weeks or months or years. There are those who came yesterday returning to a beloved place, an important place in their lives. I include myself in that constituency. And there are those who are coming maybe for the first time, arrived for the first time yesterday and probably still wondering what the heck is going on. Especially with the ceremony we had last night. It's a very powerful ceremony. It may have been quite the opening experience for being here. But we've all been new here. We've all been here for the first time. We've all wondered what lay behind the door. I remember my first visit to Tassajara, I was kind of terrified to go behind the men's bathhouse door because I had no idea what it looked like behind there. Because you go behind the door and it's like, oh, just bathing. It's very quiet and somber. But when you first come to the Zendo and you're first trying to figure out what's happening, there's a very particular quality to that. There's a very particular kind of attention that we need when we're new to somewhere, and there are a lot of rules and regulations and forms and guidelines, and you're trying to do your best to follow or to make sense of what's happening. And also we're not talking a lot of the time. So how is it to be moving in community without the usual social lubricants of small talk? It's a wonderful learning experience. It's a steep learning curve, but it's a very powerful moment, I think. But I want to add that even if we're not talking to each other, we're still meeting each other, and we meet each other with presence, and this is an important part of the practice here. And those of you who are here for a week, my group is, the Monterey group is, the Chomp group is, I do just want to encourage you, if you're not already feeling that you're doing so, to make the most of being here. Tassajara is an incredible place. We have opportunities that we don't get elsewhere. Not least of which is being removed from the hindrances of being online. So, in my group we've been talking about, how many more hours in the day there seem to be when you're not constantly checking your screens. Maybe you miss it, maybe you don't. But whatever response you've been having in the last 24 and a few hours, just notice that. Notice how it is to move at human speed. We all drove a long way to be here, even if you just came from Monterey. But now that we're here, we're just walking. We're walking and meeting each other. And I know that when I come to Tassajara, I move differently. It feels like I don't have the burdens of my city life. I don't have that constant distraction, that constant call elsewhere. I'm right here. And sometimes, when you come in, it seems that the valley is very kind of narrow and constricted. And then as you walk around, the valley opens up. And you feel the spaciousness. right now, it's a particularly auspicious time to be here. Not only do we have the beautiful landscape that we always have, the incredible summer heat, we had supermoon last night, or the last few nights. So I was lucky enough to see it in the city on Monday night. My partner and I walked over so we could see it rising above the Bay Bridge. It's kind of orange, in fact. And then the next night, here it is, rising above the hills of Tassajara, very, very bright. So if you didn't see it last night, it's going to rise even later tonight. But maybe if you get up early, you'll see how bright the full moon is at Tassajara. It's quite incredible. And then, later in the week when the moon is not up, you get a chance to see stars that you don't see generally. And we're here in the elements. And, we can be face to face with a lizard, or as I was just before, getting dressed, a whole chain of ants running up and down the wall of the bathroom. Make the most of these encounters. Treasure them, taste them, savor them. Don't taste the ants, but taste the connection, the meeting. I've heard Tassajara described as a wonderful Buddha field. This place, this practice place that has been venerated long before Europeans came to America. And it's been venerated by Europeans for 130, 40 years. This place has been, handed down to us. And this week, we are creating it together. We're creating Tassajara together this week. And those of you who were at the work circle this morning, you heard, James, who was leaving his mother. I hadn't met either of them before, but you could feel the impact that being at Tassajara for a few days or a few months has on people. It's a powerful place. And it leaves its mark on us. And we in turn leave our mark on Tassajara. So, because of the time I spent here, I happened to have sat Tangaria with the abbot and central abbot David, which dates me somewhat. Leslie's hair was already white, I think, then. We were all a lot younger. And as I came here, I saw, names and faces of people that I've practiced with over 20 years. They've come and gone, I've come and gone. But people who, are part of my practice history. And as I walk around, I see rocks that I've placed over the years, things that I've built. And as it happened, when I went into my cabin, there was a photograph that I'd taken back in 2003, one spring morning on the Tony Trail, and we still had film cameras. Very few opportunities to take pictures. So, I first came to live at Tassajara in 2002, and I did a couple of 2-year stretches and some 3-month stretches. And then I lived at City Center for some time as well. And I left Zen Center in 2015, so it's been already quite a few years. And when I first left Tassajara, I dreamt about Tassajara, I think every night for several weeks, because it was so powerful. And these days I find myself dreaming about community a lot. And, being part of a crowd with a purpose. And recently I had a very powerful dream where I had some inner power, some glowing inner power that was kind of a beneficial inner power, thankfully. And a whole bunch of Zen Center people came to investigate, like, hey, what's going on? And then Christina Lanehair, the former abbess, who some of you know, who was the personification of a heart-based practice, also kind of appeared in the dream, as if she was kind of guiding me with what to do with this power. And I woke up thinking, we all have this power within us. I think probably many of us are here because we feel this and we want to bring this power for the benefit of the world. This kind of loving kindness, this wish to do good. Maybe we don't always know how to do it. Maybe we don't have the space to manifest this power. But here at Tassajara, there is space to manifest it, even if you're just here for 1 week. There is a container that is built, a strong container. and the power of the community here, I think is particularly important right now. And again, this is a discussion I've had, several times in the groups that I teach. I think we are still all recovering from the pandemic, from the isolation, from the kind of mistrust of not knowing what was going to happen or how safe we were. The amazing sense of isolation and fear. And so I think it's especially important now as we kind of pick up more, social activities, to recognize and appreciate the power of being in community. I mean, living in community is already an incredibly powerful and kind of radical statement in some ways. I always appreciated that when I was living at Zen Center. The kind of the collective strength of the community was something, even as a strong introvert, the collective strength of living in community was something I always appreciated. And one of the things about being community is we have a particular responsibility. And I know when I say this, some of the people who've been here over the summer might kind of be rolling their eyes because they have many responsibilities and they have to take over somebody else's job and then they have to do something else and there's always another thing for them to be doing. But we can come down here and the Tenzo feeds us. The Tenzo feeds us delicious food. Sesame soybeans accepted, I'm sorry. When I was the Tenzo at the city centre in charge of the kitchen, and I vowed never to cook sesame soybeans because they disagreed with me so much. But I'm grateful for the food, I'm grateful to be fed, certainly grateful for blondies. And the Ino sets out this place for us so that we can sit together. Everyone is taking their place, taking their role. Within that, we make our own effort, but we are always supported. The director goes to meetings so that we don't have to go to meetings. And the abbot goes to a lot of meetings, I know. I wanted to talk a little bit more for those who weren't familiar with it about the ceremony last night because it is a powerful ceremony. It's a monthly ceremony that dates back to the time of the Buddha. And what holds a community together is vow. We are endeavoring to live a life of vow. And a life of vow takes us away from a life of habit. We all have our own particular habits, we all have our own particular foibles. And we can vow to be in the world in a way that, benefits beings rather than kind of causes harm. And so, I just want to go through briefly the elements of the ceremony for those who aren't maybe familiar with it. And we started with an avowal and repentance of, our karmic repentance. And, these words sound loaded, confessing and repenting our ancient twisted karma. It sounds, like a bit of a downer. But I think there is something incredibly powerful about understanding the causes and conditions that brought us to where we are in our lives. Right? Personal causes and conditions, or our individual lives, our family causes and conditions, cultural causes and conditions, and societal causes and conditions. And we make an effort to be honest about that and be clear about it. And I can certainly hold up my hand and say I failed this many, many times in my Zen Center years. But we keep trying. We keep trying to live understanding our own karma. And again, we make our own effort, and in this we're always supported by others. And so the second part of the ceremony is paying homage to the Buddhas, homage to the Bodhisattvas. We take note of those who have gone before, whose example shows us how we can practice today. Especially with the Bodhisattvas who each embody one particular kind of behavior. Manjushri is the Bodhisattva of wisdom, right there with a sword that cuts through delusion on the altar. Samantabhadra is the Bodhisattva of activity, often pictured riding an elephant. Avalokiteshvara is the Bodhisattva of compassion. She is right at the back of the altar. So these are models that we can aspire to. And they show that it's possible for us to practice in this way. and we chant at another time, Buddhas and ancestors of old were as we in the future shall be Buddhas and ancestors. And it's very hard for us to believe that because we don't have the perspective. But it's true. And we honor those who've made their effort and show us how we can do that. And then we have our 4 bodhisattva vows that we take regularly. We're trying to live our best as bodhisattvas. And when I was chanting them last night, right here, I kind of felt the first 2 were almost kind of like downers, Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. It's like, oh my God, that's impossible. Delusions are exhaustible, I vow to end them. Oh God, how can I even get started on that? But the second 2 were kind of more, guiding you upwards. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. This means that every single moment of our lives is a Dharma gate. Can we vow to enter that Dharma gate moment after moment after moment? That's the effort we make. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we do the refuges, taking refuge in Buddha, the teacher, right there, pride of place on the altar. Fantastic Buddha that we went and buried in the Bocce Ball Court in 2008, I remember. And it's been buried again since then, I think. Anyway, I'm talking ancient history, and so all my stories are so old, that all my Tassajara stories are very, very old now. But, we take refuge in Buddha. We take refuge in Dharma, the teaching, the truth, that Buddha expressed, but it wasn't his discovery. It's the truth from which the Buddhas arose. And we take refuge in Sangha. This is everybody here. This is everybody around us. This is every being that we can try not to disregard. And taking refuge is not kind of going off and hiding somewhere. So, I'm not a Japanese scholar, but I think ki-e, the Japanese word for taking refuge, that those of you who've sewn any of these robes, will be familiar with. It's kind of throwing yourself into something wholeheartedly that then holds you up. And then we had the precepts. These particular ways of body, speech, and mind that are likely to trip us up, likely to cause problems, cause issues. There are many beautiful, all the commentaries that Mako read after the precepts are very, very beautiful. And if you don't know them, I encourage you to study them. They're all by Dogen. And I was thinking, to include some from the pure precepts, vowing to refrain from all evil, making every effort to live in enlightenment, living and being lived for the benefit of all beings. But I also I wanted to particularly highlight the commentary on the 6th precept, I vow not to slander. The commentary is, in the Buddha Dharma, go together, appreciate together, realize together, actualize together. And this actualizing is the kind of the meat of Zen practice. Because we can study it, we can sit, we can do all the practices, we can realize it, we can understand what it's all about, but until we actualize it, until we embody it, it's not our practice, it's not the practice that leaps forward and helps all beings. Don't permit fault-finding, don't permit haphazard talk, do not corrupt the way. Wonderful words for living in community, because it's inevitable in community that we don't like everybody that we're hanging out with. Even in Tassajara, there's people that we just don't get on with. Nevertheless, we can vow to follow this way. And I wanted to change tack a little bit. So I've become somewhat of I don't know quite how, a little bit of a historian of Suzuki Roshi and some of his history at Zen Center. And I've listened to and worked with a lot of the talks that he gave. And thankfully, many of the talks were recorded. And I was particularly interested a few years ago when we found, the set of reel-to-reel tapes, for those of you old enough to know what a reel-to-reel tape is, of the very first sesshin that was given at Tassajara. So for those who don't know, Zen Center bought Tassajara in 1967, and it was kind of officially opened on July the 4th, 1967. And they did a summer practice period, much as you're doing a summer practice period now. But the kicker was they did a sesshin. I'm not completely convinced I know how many days there are in sesshin, because even Suzuki Roshi in the talks doesn't seem to know how many days there are left in the sesshin. But nevertheless, it was the 20th through at least to the 24th of August. So you can imagine sitting in sesshin. Obviously they weren't in this room at that time, because at that time the Zendo was back down by the creek in what's now the student eating area, and had previously been the bar of the Tassajara Hotel that stood on this side. Very auspicious room, obviously. But there was a sesshin going on in the middle of August. I'm not sure if they still had guests visiting during that week, but certainly they were sitting a lot in the middle of the heat. But what I find interesting is what Suzuki Roshi chose to talk about. So obviously he'd had this long ambition, and reading the Zen Center history, it seems that for at least 5 years before Tassajara was bought, people from Zen Center were going out around the Bay Area. They went up to Jena, they went to various places to find a monastic location, a place where they could do this kind of monastic practice. And obviously when Tassajara was found, Suzuki Roshi said, this is the place. And so he had this chance to start, for the first time outside of Asia, a Zen training monastery. This is Tassajara's legacy and history, which we're doing our best to continue to this day. And so it's his chance to really go deep with some of his students who've been with him for 2, 3, or 4 years. But what he talked about in that first sesshin was mostly Dogen's Genjo Koan. And the reason that's interesting is that nowhere in the Genjo Koan does Dogen talk about Zazen. So he was giving, even in the middle of a sesshin where he wants his students to be sitting all day, he's talking about this text where there's no mention of Zazen. So, and the Genjo Koan was written originally for a lay follower. So it's designed for people living a lay life. And again, if it's not a text that I really encourage lifelong study of it. It's 3 pages long, and I was thinking, which bit should I talk about? But the title, Genjo Koan, in the chant book we have here is actualizing the fundamental point. So that actualizing again, that making it real in this moment. The fundamental point, the deepest concern, the ultimate. There are many translations of the title. There's 4 characters, but there's many ways you can answer it. It's really like making it real right now. How do we make it real right now? And he's not talking about Zazen. He's talking about how do we make it real in our lives. And again, even though it was written in 1231, it's entirely valid and relevant today. But I just want to talk about one section tonight. And it's what I call Dogen's 5-part harmony. So some of you are very, very familiar with this. Some of you may never heard it. So he says, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to actualize. To study the self is to forget the self. And sometimes you just hear people talking about those 2 lines because it's a great combination. But he goes on, to forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. 5th part, no trace of realization remains, and this no trace continues endlessly. So at this point, thinking, what is he talking about? So to study the self, this is what I was talking about with our karma. We study everything that has made us who we are. We study what it is, this skin bag, as we often call it in Zen, this aging body. We start young and enthusiastic, and we end up old and enthusiastic. But we try to understand our lives. When we understand, I think there's a point at which when you understand your life, you're not caught or bothered by it in the same way. You're not constantly second guessing yourself. You're not constantly wondering what's going on here. And that's part of forgetting the self. One way that I experienced forgetting the self was when I first started doing the role that I was in last night, the chant leader. Again, I'm an introvert. I'm English. I hate the sound of my own voice. How on earth could I be leading the chant? I'm not used to, I certainly grew up not being used to express myself wholeheartedly. That was not encouraged where I came from. So the idea of standing up in front of everybody and chanting loudly was kind of terrifying. And it was only when I remembered or realized that it wasn't me doing that. It was the Dharma expressing itself, because the things you're chanting, it's not you, it's the Dharma. The Dharma is expressing itself. I just happened to be the person expressing it at that moment, because that was my role that day. After that, I was able to chant, lead the chant. So that's when you forget the self. And when you forget the self, you can be actualized by myriad things. So this is the same as Dharma gates are boundless. Like the myriad things are everything around us. The crickets, the creek, the trees, the stars, the comets, the satellites, the annoying person who's sitting next to you and sniffling through Zazen, all these things. And instead of getting in the way with our ideas and opinions, and I know the Monterey group is studying Xinqing Ming, so like when you let go of those preferences, when you let go of your idea of like, this person is annoying me, it's not that they stop annoying you, but it doesn't get in the way of experiencing the moment with the person. And this is the important thing. Can you put aside that, oh my God, this person is so annoying, and meet that person in that moment without your, I call them blinkers generally, but without your preconceptions getting in the way. And when you do that, there is an actualization that happens with people, with trees, with lizards, you name it. It can happen. I remember one time I came down here and I was due to give a talk, and I was the director at City Centre, and I had not had time to prepare a talk. And I came down here, I went to the bars, I was lying in the creek, a dragonfly came by, dipped in the water and flew on. And that was it, then I had a talk to give. I was literally getting out of the way, suddenly the moment produced itself. Dogen's way of talking about it, the way I understand it, is everything is expressing its enlightenment. Everything. Crickets are expressing cricket enlightenment right now. So are we going to join in? Because we can join in. We have that power, we have that capacity within us, if we can get out of our own way. And that's your body and mind and the body and mind of others dropping away. Because all those interfering thoughts, all those second guessings, all those confusions don't get in the way of experiencing the moment. No trace of realization remains, and its no trace continues endlessly. So we think there's some kind of enlightenment out there that if we behave right, if we do all the right things. I certainly had this delusion for many, many years when I came to Zen practice. Oh, if I do all of this stuff, suddenly there'll be this moment when I can grab this thing called enlightenment. And Suzuki Roshi was very clear with his students, because I think in the 60s they had a lot of ideas about enlightenment. He was very, very clear, and he was channeling Dogen a lot. And if you read Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, you can hear Dogen in what Suzuki Roshi is saying, even when he's not quoting him directly. Any idea you have about enlightenment is not enlightenment. When you let go of all those ideas, there's this endless enlightenment that's happening already. The crickets are telling you all about it. The trees are telling you all about it. The creek is telling you all about it, all the time. So can we join in? And maybe this is, expounding the Dharma with this body, as the commentary for the last precept goes. to expound the Dharma with this body is foremost. We actualize the moment with everything else. We're making our own effort, but everything else is supporting us, just as it does in community. We have to make our own effort, and when we do that, everything is supporting us. To expound the Dharma with this body is foremost. The virtue returns to the ocean of reality. It's not ours to keep. We're bodhisattvas. We give this stuff away. At the end of the ceremony, Mako gave away all the merit that we generated through our chanting and bowing and offering. We give it away because we don't want to keep it for ourselves. It's no good to us. But we can benefit the world with it through this generosity of giving. We give in community. We give to other people. We give them our presence. Nothing people like more than presence. When you show up for somebody, even if you don't like them, you show up for them, they know it. And you can do this walking down the street. You can be present for a situation, and somebody knows that. It's a lot safer to do it with babies and dogs, by the way, but you can do it with people too. The virtue returns to the ocean of reality. We're just a part of the reality that's unfolding right now, all around us. We make our effort and we are supported by everybody. It's unfathomable. So do not try to get your head around it, because you just get in your own way when you do that. Let it happen. You just accept it with respect and gratitude. I have another page here. So going back to Dongshan, when Dongshan took his leave, Nanwan said, make a thorough study of the Buddha Dharma and broadly benefit the world. Dongshan said, I have no question about studying the Buddha Dharma, but what is it to broadly benefit the world? Not to disregard a single being. So the way we don't disregard a single being is by forgetting the self, being actualized by the myriad things. And these beings are sentient and non-sentient. Dongshan was eventually enlightened by understanding how insentient beings express the Dharma, whether that's the mountains or the waters or anything else. And there's something about love in all of this. Again, it's a love that is offered without thought of anything coming back. It's an unconditioned love that we can offer to the present moment, can offer to each other. Perfection of just giving without any thought about what's coming back to us. And again, we can do this when we get out of our own way. And that's what it means to live and be lived for the benefit of all beings. And this is how we get the chance to become Buddha's way.
Thank you for listening to this podcast offered by the San Francisco Zen Center. Our Dharma talks are offered free of charge, and this is made possible by the donations we receive. Your financial support helps us to continue to offer the Dharma. For more information, visit sfzc.org and click Giving.